Fiona arranged for the house to be empty and for the door to be left open. She's never lived far from the house. There was a comfort, a threat, a reminder, a Stonehenge, a totem of things that actually happened to her. The house was old when she was a child. That her body has aged faster than the house. There are so many kinds of years. There are dog years and people years and house years and geological years. House years and geological years and cosmic years. And I know I repeated this last two. It's a joke and she laughs at it with it. Even though all jokes are cruel. The house is a New England colonial. Blue with red and white shutters and trim, recently painted. The first floor windows festooned with flower boxes. She stands in the house's considerable shadow. She was once small, and then she became big. And now she's becoming small again, and that process is painful, but not without joy and an animal sense of satisfaction that the coming end is earned. She thinks of endings and beginnings as she climbs the 5 steps onto the front porch. Adjacent to the front door and to her left is a white historical placard with the year 1819 and the house's name. Her older brother Sam said that you could never say the house's name out loud, or you would wake up the ghosts. And she never did say the name, not even once. The ghosts were there anyway. Fiona never liked the house's name and thought it was silly and worse because of the name pre-existing and now post-existing. It means that the house was never hers. Despite everything, she always wanted the house to be hers. Fiona hesitates at the front door. Go to the front door. Fiona decides not to go inside the house after all and walks back to the car. Go to leaving the house. The front door. It's like Fiona has always and forever been standing at the front door. She places a hand on the wood and wonders what's on the other side. What has changed? What has remained the same? Change is always on the other side of a door. Open a door. Close a door. Walk in, walk out, repeat. It's a loop, or another way of looking at it, it's a wheel. She doesn't open the door and instead imagines a practice run. Her opening the door and walking through into the house, stepping lightly into each of the rooms, careful not to disturb anything, and she is methodical in itemizing and identifying the ghosts. She feels what she thinks she is going to feel, and she doesn't linger in either the basement or her parents' bedroom. And she eventually walks out of the house, and all this is still in her head. And she closes the door, turns around, stands in the same spot she's standing now, places a hand on the wood and wonders what is on the other side, what has changed, and what remains the same. Fiona opens the door. Go to entranceway. Fiona is not ready to open the door. Go to the front door. Fiona decides to walk back to the car and not go inside the house. Go to leaving the house. entranceway. Fiona gently pushes the front door closed, watches it nestle into the frame, and listens for the latching mechanism to click into place before turning her full attention to the house. The house, the house, the house. Sam said because the house was so old and historical, he pronounced it his store-ickle, so that it rhymed with pickle. There was a ghost in every one of the rooms. He was right, and the house is a ghost too, that's obvious. That all the furniture, light fixtures, and decorations will be different. Most of everything will be antique or made to look antique. The present owners, they're caretakers of a living museum role play, something they take seriously. The layout changed from when she lived here won't matter, because she's not here to catalog those differences. She'll have eyes only for the ghost house. Fiona says hello because she wants to hear what she sounds like in the house of the terrible now. She says hello again, and her voice runs up the stairs, around banisters, bounces off plaster and crown molding and sconces, and she finds the sound of her now in the house, pleasing, a possible antidote to the poison of nostalgia and regret. So she says hello again, and louder. Satisfied with her reintroduction, Fiona asks, okay, where should we go first? Fiona turns to her right and walks into the living room. Go to living room. Fiona walks straight ahead into the dining room. Go to dining room. The weight of the place and its history and her history is too much. Fiona abruptly turns around and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Living room. Dad builds a fire and uses all the old newspaper to do it. Pieces glowing orange at their tips break free and float up into the flue, moving as though they're alive and choosing flight. Fiona and Sam shuffle their feet on the throw rug. And then they touch the cast iron radiator. Their static electric shocks, so big at times the blue arc is visible. Mom sits on the floor so that Fiona can climb onto the couch and jump onto her back. A bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck. The fire is out, and the two of them are by themselves, and Sam pokes around in the ashes with a twig. Sam says that little Lawrence Montague was a chimney sweep, the best and smallest in the area, and he cleaned everyone's chimney, but he got stuck and died in this chimney. So stuck, in fact, that they would not be able to get his body out without tearing the house apart. So the homeowners built a giant fire that they kept burning for 22 days until there was no more little Lawrence left. Not even his awful smell. Sam says that you can see him, or parts of him anyway, all charred and misshapen, sifting through the ash, looking for his pieces, and if you aren't careful, he'll take a piece from you. Fiona makes sure to stay away, more than an arm's length away from the fireplace. Of all the ghosts, little Lawrence scares her the most. But she likes to watch him pick through the ash, hoping to see him find those pieces of himself. There are so many. Fiona walks into the dining room. Go to dining room. Fiona walks into the kitchen. Go to kitchen. This is already harder than she thought it was going to be. Impossible, in fact. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. I hope the volume is improved. Fiona and Sam, dining room. Fiona and Sam are under the table, and their parents' legs float by like branches flowing down a river. The floorboards underneath groan and whisper, and they understand their house, know it as a musical instrument. Dad sits by himself and wants Fiona and Sam to come out from under the table and talk to him. They do, and then he doesn't know what to say or how to say it. Her father is so young, and she never realized how young he is. Mom isn't there. She doesn't want to be there. Sam says there was an 8-year-old girl named Maisie who had the strictest of parents, the kind who insisted children did not speak during dinner. And poor Maisie was choking on a piece of potato from gloopy beef stew, and she was so terrified of what her parents would do if she said anything, made any sort of noise, that she sat and quietly choked to death. Sam says you can see her at the table, sitting there with her face turning blue, her eyes as large and white as hard-boiled eggs, and if you get too close, she'll wrap her hands around your neck, and you won't be able to call out or say anything until it's too late. Of all the ghosts, Maisie scares Fiona the most, and she watches in horror as Maisie sits at the table, desperately trying to be a proper girl. Fiona walks straight ahead and into the kitchen. Go to kitchen. Fiona turns right and walks into the living room. Go to living room. Fiona bypasses the kitchen entirely and goes to the basement. Go to basement. This is harder than she thought it was going to be. Impossible, in fact. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Kitchen. Dad cooks fresh flounder and calls it fried French, and not fish, so that Fiona will eat it. The four of them play card games, cribbage mainly, at the kitchen table, and Fiona leaves the room in tears after being yelled at. Dad says he wasn't yelling, which isn't the same as saying he's sorry for continually leading into runs and allowing Sam and Mom to peg. Mom sits at the table by herself and says she feels fine and smokes a cigarette. Her mother is so young, and Fiona never realized how young she is. Sam screams and cries and smashes glasses and dishes on the hardwood floor, and no one stops him. Fiona and Mom stand at the back door and look outside, waiting for the birds to eat the stale breadcrumbs they sprinkled about their small backyard. Sam says there was a boy named Percy who was even smaller than little Lawrence. He was so small because the only thing he would eat was blueberry muffins. He loved those muffins so much he crawled inside the oven so he could better watch the muffin batter rise and turn golden brown. Sam says that you can see him curled up inside the oven, and if you get too close, he'll pull you in there with him. Of all the ghosts, Percy scares Fiona the most because of how small he is. She knows it's not polite, but she can't help but stare at his smallness. Fiona saves the basement for later and walks through the dining room, the living room, and into the den. Go to den. Fiona backtracks into the dining room. Go to dining room. Fiona goes to the living room. Go to living room. Fiona goes to the basement. Go to basement. This is harder than she thought it was going to be. Impossible, in fact. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Basement. Fiona's not ready for the basement. Not yet. Fiona saves the basement for later and walks through the dining room, the living room, and then into the den. Go to den. Fiona goes into the kitchen. Go to kitchen. The idea of going into the basement is enough to make her abandon the tour and leave the house. Go to leaving the house. Den. Sam is never delicate closing the French doors, and their little rectangular windows rattle and quiver in their frames. Fiona rearranges the books in the built-in floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, first alphabetical by author, then by title, then by color. Dad shuts the lights off in the rest of the house, leaving only the den well lit. He hides and dares his children to leave the den and find him, and he laughs as they scream with a mix of mock and real terror. Dad and Mom put Sam and Fiona in the den by themselves and shut the French doors, controlled and careful, because they're having a private talk. Mom watches the evening news with a cup of tea and invites Fiona and Sam to watch with her so that they'll know what's going on in the world. Sam and Fiona lay on the floor on their stomachs, blanket over their heads, watching a scary movie. Sam stands in front of the TV and stiff arms Fiona away, physically blocking her from changing the channel. Mom lets Fiona take a puff of her cigarette, and Fiona's lungs are on fire and she coughs, cries, nearly throws up, and Mom rubs her back and says, "Remember this so you'll never do it again." Sam says there was a girl named Olivia who liked to climb the bookcases in the walls and wouldn't stop climbing the shelves even after her parents begged her not to. And in an effort to stop her, they filled the bookcases with the heaviest leather-bound books, with the largest spines that could squeeze onto the shelves. Olivia was still determined, and she wanted to climb the shelves anyway and touch the ceiling, like she'd always done. And she almost made it to the top again, but her feet slipped, or maybe it was she couldn't get a good handhold anymore, and she fell and broke her neck. Sam says you can see Olivia high up, close to the ceiling, clinging to the shelves, and if you get too close, Olivia throws books at you, the heaviest ones, the one that can do the most damage. Of all the ghosts, Olivia scares Fiona the most, but she wants to read the books that Olivia throws at her. Fiona goes back to the foyer and to the front stairs. Go to the stairs. Fiona goes into the kitchen. Go to kitchen. The first floor was enough. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. The stairs. Sam ties his green army men to pieces of kite string and dangles them from the banister on the second floor, and Fiona is on the first floor, pretending to be a tiger that swipes at the army men, and if one of them is foolishly dropped low enough, She eats the man in one gulp. Fiona counts the stairs and makes a rhyme. Dad falls down the stairs after being dared by Sam that he can't hop down on one foot, and punches through the plaster on the first landing with his shoulder. Dad brushes himself off, shakes his head, and points to the hole and says, "Don't tell Mom." Mom walks up the stairs by herself for the last time. Fiona knows there's a last time for everything. Moving slowly, breathing heavily, and she looks back at Fiona, who trails behind, pretending not to watch. And Mom rests on the first landing and says there's a kitty cat that seems to be following her. And she says that cat is still with her when she pauses on the second landing. Sam says there was a boy named Timothy who always climbed up the stairs on the outside of the railings, his toes clinging to the edges as though he was at the edge of the great cliffs. Climbing over the banister on the second floor was the hardest part, and one morning he fell, bounced off the railings, and landed head first in the foyer below. And he didn't get up and brush himself off. Sam says that Timothy tries to trip you when you're not careful on the stairs. Of all the ghosts, Timothy scares Fiona the most, but she still walks on the stairs without holding the railings. Fiona walks up the stairs without holding the railing and actually smiles to herself, then goes to her bedroom. Go to Fiona's bedroom. The stairs make Fiona incredibly, inexplicably sad. She doesn't think she can continue. She leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Fiona's bedroom. Fiona spies out the window, which is above the front door, and as their house is on top of a hill, it overlooks the rest of the town, and she picks a spot that is almost as far as she can see and wonders what the people there are doing and thinking. Dad reads her the tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher using a British accent. It's the only storybook for which he uses the accent. Mom takes the cold face cloth off Fiona's forehead, thermometer from her mouth, and says, "Scoot over, I'll be sick with you, okay?" There is the night Dad isn't allowed in her room, and he knocks quietly. He says that he's sorry if he scared her in the basement, and he's sorry about dinner, and he's making it right now, and please open the door and come out. And he sounds watery, and she's not mad or scared. She's hungry, but tells him to go away. Sam is not allowed in her room, but he comes in anyway and gets away with it, and he smiles that smile that she hates. She misses that smile terribly now, for as much of a pain in the ass as he was as a child, he was a loyal, thoughtful, sensitive, if not melancholy, man. Sam says that there's a ghost of a girl named Wanda in Fiona's closet, and no one knows what happened to her or how she got there because she's always been there. Of all the ghosts, Wanda scares Fiona the most, because try as she might, she's never been able to talk to her. Fiona will go to all the second floor rooms in their proper order, waiting until she's ready to go to her parents' bedroom. Go to Sam's bedroom. Yeah, the second floor is indeed too much. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Sam's bedroom. Fiona sits outside Sam's room, and the door is shut, and Sam and his friends are inside talking about the Boston Red Sox and the Wind sisters, who live 2 streets over. Fiona finds magazines filled with pictures of naked women under Sam's bed. Dad is inside Sam's room yelling at, and maybe even hitting Sam, because Sam hit Fiona because Fiona took some of his Green Army men and threw them into the sewer because Sam wouldn't play with her. Sam lets Fiona sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag. She always asked to do this because they watched a scary movie and she can't sleep, but isn't scared and tries to stay awake long enough to notice how different it is sleeping in Sam's room. Mom hides under Sam's piled bed sheets and blankets, and they trick Dad into going into Sam's room, and she jumps out and scares him so badly he falls down on the floor and holds his chest. Sam tells Fiona to come into his room, and she's worried he's going to sneak attack, give her a dead arm or something. Instead, he's crying. He says that they aren't going to live in the house anymore. Sam says that there aren't any ghosts in his room and tells her to stop asking about it. So Fiona makes one up. She says there's a boy who got crushed underneath his dirty clothes that piled up to the ceiling, and no one ever found the boy. And Sam never takes his dirty clothes downstairs because he's afraid of the boy. Of all the ghosts, this one scares Fiona the most because she forgot to name him. Fiona goes into the bathroom. Go to bathroom. The second floor is indeed too much. Fiona doesn't think she can continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Bathroom. Dad leaves the bathroom door open when he shaves his face, and he says, "Oh, there goes my nose, and oops, no more lips, and guess I don't need a chin." The shaving foam is so white and puffy when Fiona puts it on her face, and she greedily inhales its minty menthol smell. Sam is in the bathroom for a long, long time, with what he says are his comic books. Mom is strong, and she doesn't cry anywhere else in the house. Certainly never in front of Fiona or Sam, but she cries when she's by herself and taking a bath, and the water is running. The sound of a bath being run never fails to make Fiona think about Mom. Everyone else is in her parents' bedroom, and to her great, never-ending shame, Fiona is in the bathroom with the door shut, sitting on the floor, the tile hard and cold on her backside, the bath running, the drain unstopped so the tub won't fill, and she cries and Dad knocks gently on the door and asks if she's okay and asks her to come back, but she stays in the bathroom for hours until it's over. Sam says that there was a boy named Charlie who loved to take baths and stayed in them so long that his toes and feet and hands and everything got so wrinkly that his whole body shriveled and shrank until he eventually slipped right down the drain. Sam says that if you stay in the bath too long, Charlie will suck you into the drain with him. Of all the ghosts, Fiona finds Charlie the least scary, and she talks to him in the drain. Fiona goes into the hallway and stands in front of her parents' bedroom. Go to parents' bedroom door. Fiona stays in the bathroom as she did those many years ago. Go to bathroom. Fiona is almost certain she cannot continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Parents' bedroom door. The door is closed. It's the only door in her haunted house that is closed. Even the door of the basement and the kitchen is open. This door is closed. It's a Saturday afternoon, and the door is closed and locked. And Fiona knocks, and Mom says, "Please give them a few minutes of privacy." Then she giggles from somewhere deep down inside the room. Fiona knocks again, and Dad is yelling at her to get lost. The door is closed because it's almost Christmas. And she doesn't believe in Santa anymore, but hasn't said anything, and she knows she can't go into her parents' room because their presents are wrapped and stacked along one bedroom wall. The door is closed, and Mom's smallest voice is telling her that she can come in, but Fiona doesn't want to. Fiona places a hand on the wood, and her hand is a ghost of her younger hands. She wonders what's on the other side, what has changed, what has remained the same. Change is always on the other side of a door. Open a door, close a door, walk in, walk out, repeat. It's a loop, a wheel. Of all the ghosts, the ones in her parents' bedroom scare her the most because maybe nothing ever changes. And even though she's an adult and likes to think of herself at this age as beyond adult because its connotations are so much more dignified and well-earned than the title elderly, she's afraid she'll make all the same decisions over and over again. Fiona opens the door. Go to parents' bedroom. Fiona returns to the bathroom. Go to bathroom. Fiona simply cannot continue and leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Parents' bedroom. Hi, everyone. Sam and Fiona wrestled Dad on the bed, with his signature move being a blanket toss over their bodies like a net so that he can tickle them with impunity. Fiona tells Mom that Dad shouldn't have hit Sam because she kind of deserved what he did to her for throwing his army men in the sewer. Mom stands in the room wearing only a loose-fitting bra and underwear, and she yells at her clothes, discarded and piled at the edge of the bed, saying nothing she has fits her anymore. She says, "It's all just falling off me." It's Christmas morning, and Sam and Fiona sit in the dark on the floor next to Mom's side of the bed, watching the clock, waiting for 6 a.m. so that they can all go downstairs. Mom is in bed. She's home from the hospital. She says she's not going back. Despite the oppressive heat, Fiona sleeps wedged between her parents during a thunderstorm, counting Mississippis after lightning strikes. Fiona gives Mom ice chips because she can't eat anything else, and Mom says thank you after each chip passes between her dried, cracked lips. Dad sets up a mirror opposite the full-length mirror and takes pictures of Fiona and her reflections from different angles with his new camera. She doesn't remember ever seeing the photos. Mom's skin is a yellowish green, the color of pea soup, which Fiona hates, and her eyes, when they are open, are large and terrible. And they are terrible because they are not Mom's. They are Maisie's eyes, and her body has shriveled up like Charlie's, and pieces of her have been taken away as if she was little Lawrence. And she says nothing like Maisie and Wendy say nothing. And Sam is standing in a corner of the room with his arms wrapped around himself like boa constrictors, and Dad sits on the bed rubbing Mom's hand, asking her if she needs anything. And when a nurse and doctor arrive, she doesn't remember their names and wants to give them ghosts' names. Fiona does not stay in the room with her family. She runs out and goes into the bathroom and sits on the floor and runs a bath. And she hasn't forgiven herself, even though she was so young, a child, a frightened and heartbroken, confused, angry child, for not staying in the room with Mom until the end. Sam says there was a girl named Fiona who looked like her and acted like her, and her parents stopped caring for one day. So Fiona faded away and disappeared. Sam says if Fiona doesn't stop going into Mom and Dad's room, the ghost Fiona will take her over, and she'll disappear, fade away. Of all the ghosts, Ghost Fiona scares her the most, even though she knows Sam is trying to scare her out of the room so he can wrestle Dad by himself. And she thinks there are times when Ghost Fiona takes over her body and the real Fiona goes away. And sometimes she wishes for that to happen. Fiona is determined to finish her tour. She walks downstairs, walks through the first floor, into the kitchen, ignoring Percy, and then down to the basement. Go to basement. Fiona is still reenacting the night her mother died in her bedroom, and she goes back into the bathroom. Go to bathroom. Fiona doesn't have to go to the basement. She leaves the house. Go to leaving the house. Fiona, basement. Fiona does a lap around the basement, sometimes holding her hands above her head or tight against her body so that she won't brush up against the forgotten boxes, sawhorses, and piles of wood and roof shingles, and careful to not go near Dad's work area, off limits, with its bitey tools and slippery sawdust. But she has to go fast as Sam is counting, and if she doesn't make it back to the stairs before he counts to 20, he kills the light. At some point, he'll kill the light anyway. Fiona follows Mom to the silver, cow-sized freezer and watches her struggle to lift out a frozen block of meat. Sam places his green army men on top of the dryer, and they'll make bets about which plastic man will stay on the longest, and Fiona doesn't care if she loses, because she loves the smell of the warm, soft, humid dryer exhaust. Dad has been in the basement all day, and they haven't eaten dinner, and Sam is not there. She forgets where Sam is, but he's not in the house. And Mom has been gone for exactly 1 year, and Fiona doesn't call out Dad's name and instead creeps down to the basement as quietly as she can, and the only light on in the basement is the swinging bulb in Dad's work area, and a static-tinged radio plays Motown, and Fiona can't see Dad or his work area from the bottom of the stairs, only the light, so she sneaks in over past the washer-dryer and the freezer, and Dad sits on his stool, his back is to her, his legs splayed, his right arm pistons up and down like he's hammering a nail. But there's no hammering a nail sound, and he's breathing heavy, and there are beer cans all over his table. And she says, "Dad, are we having dinner?" Even though she knows she should not say anything and should go back up the stairs and find something to eat. And he jumps up from the chair, back still turned to her. Beer cans fall, a magazine flutters to the dirty floor, and if it's not the exact same magazine, it's like one of the Naked Girl magazines she found in Sam's room, and so do photos of Mom. And there are black and white photos of her. And she's by herself. And she's young and laughing, and she's on the beach, running towards the camera, with her arms over her head. And Fiona has always loved those pictures of Mom on the beach, and Dad's shirt is untucked and hanging over his unbuckled pants. And instead of getting mad or yelling, he talks to Sam the way you might talk when you're in trouble, in a little boy voice, asking what she's doing down here. And he picks up the magazine and the pictures, and he doesn't turn around to face her. And then she asks what he was doing, and he slumps back into his chair and cries. And he starts throwing the beer cans, empty and full, off the wall, and Fiona runs out of the basement, all in less than 20 seconds. Sam says that the ghost of every person who ever lived in the house eventually goes to the basement, and that some houses have so many ghosts in their basements that they line the walls and they're stacked like cords of wood. Fiona has finally seen all the ghosts and spent enough time with them. She can now leave the house. Go to leaving the house. Fiona goes back up all the stairs to stand in front of her parents' bedroom door. Go to parents' bedroom door. Leaving the house. It's colder now than it was when she arrived. Fiona walks to her car and won't allow herself to stop and turn and stare at the house. Even with the visit cut short, she knows the ghosts are not trapped in the house, not bound to both the permanence and impermanence of the place, as she once foolishly hoped. The ghosts do not follow behind her in a polite single-file Pied Piper line to be catalogued, then archived and forgotten. The ghosts are with her and will be with her always. It is not a comfort, because she will not allow it to be a comfort. How can she? As always, Fiona is too hard on herself. She remains her very own ghost that scares her the most. Fiona does not forgive herself. Go to the front door. Fiona returns to the house. Go to the front door. Leaving the house. It's colder now than it was when she arrived. Fiona walks to her car and won't allow herself to stop and turn and stare at the house. She knows the ghosts are not trapped in the house, not bound to both the permanence and impermanence of place, as she once foolishly hoped. The ghosts do not follow behind her in a polite single-file Pied Piper line to be catalogued, then archived and forgotten. The ghosts are with her, have always been with her, and continue to be with her. And maybe that can be a comfort, a confirmation, if she'll let it. Fiona was 10 years old when Mom died from colon cancer. Her father died of cystic fibrosis 37 years later. Dad never remarried and moved to Florida when he got sick, and Fiona wrote him letters. He wrote back until he became too weak to do so, and she talked to him every other day on the phone. And she spent 3 of her 4 weeks of vacation visiting him. And her lovely brother, Sam, cared for Dad during the last 2 years of his life. Poor Sam died of pneumonia after suffering a series of strokes 5 years ago. She doesn't know what to do, so she starts talking. She says to her father, who she knew for much longer, so much more intimately than her mother, yet somehow it feels like she didn't know him as well, as though the glut of father data confuses and contradicts. I'm sorry we let every day be more awkward and formal than they should have been. I'm sorry I never told you that I don't blame you for anything you did or said in grief. I never did, and I want to say, having outlived my Marcy, that I understand. Then she says to Mom, who she knew for only 10 years, less really in terms of the ever-shrinking timeline of memory, and of course, somehow more. I'm sorry I didn't stay. I wish I'd stayed with you. And I can stay with you now if you want me to. Fiona cries, old tears, the ones dredged from a bottomless well, a child's never-ending grief. And she cries at the horror and beauty of pastime, and she chides herself for being a sentimental old fool, despite having given herself permission to be one. As always, Fiona is too hard on herself, and she remains her very own ghost that scares her the most. Fiona is still turned away from the house. She feels fingers pulling on the back of her coat, trying to drag her back into the house, to go through it all again. Fiona still cannot forgive herself for not staying in her parents' bedroom with her mother until the end. She fears that her mother's end, all ends for that matter, is cruelly eternal, and that her mother is still there alone and waiting for Fiona to finally and forever come back. Go to the front door. Fiona is still turned away from the house, and she feels fingers pulling on the back of her coat, trying to drag her back into the house and through it all again, or maybe pull her away from everything, pull her away finally until she's hopelessly lost. But she doesn't want to be lost. Fiona walks around the car, tracing the cold metal frame with one hand to the driver's side door, then gets in the car and starts the engine, which turns over in its tired mechanical way. She shifts into first gear. The tires turn slowly, but they do turn. Go to the end. The end.